The very best tool that you can use to document your workflow is Microsoft Visio 2010. Visio is meant to diagram processes, to diagram layouts, and many folks are used to looking at different diagrams that are made with Visio. You may have Visio on your computer already. If you do, you'll find it in the Microsoft Office group. And I'm going to go ahead and click on flowcharts because a workflow needs a flowchart. You'll notice that there's a set of templates called Microsoft SharePoint Workflow. There are 3 different editions of Microsoft Visio for 2010: Standard, Professional, and Premium. This Microsoft SharePoint Workflow is only available with Premium, and we'll be discussing this later in this course. But whether you have Standard, Professional, or Premium, all of them have some flowcharting tools that you can use. The way you decide what tool to use is a 2-step process. One part is, what tool are you most familiar with using? But the second is, which of the tools is going to create diagrams that you'll be able to explain easily to your users? Because ultimately, after you're done diagramming, you will then take and share this with your users to say, this is what I understood that you said. So if you're comfortable with flowcharts and your users are too, use a basic flowchart. If your users are comfortable with flowcharts or with cross-functional flowcharts, go ahead and bounce up to the cross-functional flowchart, because each of the lanes here is for one role, one user, or one group, and they're really easy for folks to focus on. I create a number of cross-functional flowcharts, but actually the tool here that I love is the workflow diagram, because it's really easy for folks to understand it. I'm going to go ahead and double-click to lay out a workflow diagram. I'm going to turn my paper sideways to make it easier for my diagram, because I'm going to run left to right on the page. And let's begin then by saying that we have a user that has a need. Now, there are workflow objects and departments here, but there's one more set of shapes that I always will turn on for this workflow diagram. Click on More Shapes, Flowchart, and down at the bottom, you'll find Workflow Steps, and I'll turn that on as well, because these are your action items. So let's start with a user who wants to make a request. I'm going to drag that request right out here into my flowchart, and I want them to fill out a form to do that. A form is an object, so I'm going to come over and grab a document and drag it in as well. Notice that as I get close to the shape that is already there, I get a line that shows me whether I'm lining up with the top, center, or bottom of the existing shape. So I'm going to drop my form there. That form then is going to be reviewed by Mary. Mary's going to decide who to route that form to next. So we'll go ahead and grab a person shape, and that will be Mary. If the request comes from a user in manufacturing, there's a requirement that the Chief Operating Officer be involved in approving this request. So let's go to Department, and we could either grab a manager from here if we wish, or there's the manufacturing section. Those are entire departments. Or I can see if there's a Chief Operating Officer here under Workflow Objects. So we'll put the Chief Operating Officer in here. Now at the bottom of almost every set of shapes, you'll find something called a dynamic connector. Drag it into your diagram. It's an arrow that goes in one direction, left to right. I'll point the back of it here to my first shape, and notice that I have a red line around the shape and it says glue to shape. Simply drop it there and the line will be glued, and there's a little red symbol here that shows that. I'm now going to grab the other end, glue it to this shape. So I'm connecting one step to the next to the next. If I want to add a comment, I can simply double-click anywhere here. So if I want to add a comment to the form, I can double-click on the form and it will let me type below it. So I can note the name of the form. I can also double-click and type on the lines. So we're going to email this, and so on. You might want to move your other shapes so you have room for the text to show. And the other thing is, I don't have to just type on objects or connecting lines. I can actually go back to the Home tab, click on Text, and draw a large text box and put any notes in it that I want to. When I'm all done, I'll have a nice looking diagram that most of my users will be able to understand pretty easily. So Visio is a great place for me to capture workflows because it has all the symbols and shapes that I need in order to identify different roles and different objects, but also because it's really easy to understand for all of my users.